I see myself either as a midwife, bringing to life things, as a shepherd, guiding people, but having an investment. I also think of myself sometimes as Virgil. And if you've ever read Dante's Inferno, Virgil is who leads Dante into hell. And, as helping professionals, that's where we need to go sometimes, right? And to be able to go there fearlessly with someone to carry them.
Hello, everyone. I am Michelle Melville Cashant. I am the Community and Content Director here at Sexual Health Alliance. And today I'm with Jo Zarate-Sanderlin. Welcome, Jo.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's great to meet with you today.
And stay tuned till the end of this video when Jo answers the question, what's the wildest piece of advice someone's ever given you about relationships? And did it actually work? It's great to have you here. Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am a licensed marriage and family therapist based in San Francisco, California. This month is actually the 20th anniversary of moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. And I moved to California, went to Yosemite, went to Burning Man, started graduate school for therapy, all in about a 2-month period. So this is my third career. I used to be in book marketing, and then I was an IT director in a law firm. But I figured out that I was doing more interpersonal things. And I had heard about this cool school in California called Pacifica Graduate Institute, which is a Jungian oriented institution. And I say Jungian with a hard G because if I say union, people think I work with electricians and nurses and other people in unions. And the reality is I really wanted to study Jung, but the way that I could make it actually happen is to become a therapist. So I didn't actually want to be a therapist 25 years ago. And it turned into my vocation. So here I am 20 years later, licensed since 2013. I sit on the board of directors for our state level nonprofit organization called CAMFT, the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I helped plan our conference this year, which was in San Francisco and featured some amazing speakers talking about psychedelics and neurodivergence and gender and how those things overlap. So I have a private practice in San Francisco. So I see clients in person in the Mission District, and I mostly see folks online using Zoom. I also teach at 2 institutions, Golden Gate University, which is a little more traditional. It's funny enough, there are therapy schools in the business school. I never thought I would work for a business school.
Yeah.
But I've tried to bring, queer it up and punk it up a little bit because I get a lot of freedom in how I teach. So I teach human sexuality and cross-cultural psychology and practicum and working with families and working on communication there. And then the other institution is this cool little place in Berkeley called the Western Institute of Social Research, WISER. And it's sub 50 students. It's student-led. So you essentially take the courses that we offer, but you're allowed to bring to it what you want to bring to it, and it will still help you become an MFT. So if you're interested in neurodivergence, one of my students is in the process of being, I think, in second trimester pregnancy. So talking about that in light of the therapy work. And there it's more of a mentor role. So you get one-on-one time with the students. But what I realized is what we do at Wiser, which is what they call the Wiser way, it's the wise owl, right? Is what I was doing at Golden Gate University, which is encouraging students to speak from the I. To me, therapy education is really about self-examination. I can teach you techniques, but I can't teach you to look under the hood and, kick the tires and whatnot. And I think that's what's so important about therapy education is really looking at yourself, shedding light on unconscious biases, learning what you don't know. And outside of my therapy education, a lot of my learning has been heuristic and experiential. Like, I am not an ASEX certified sex therapist.
Okay.
I do not have a PhD in human sexuality or sexology. A lot of, you've heard this thing that the best way to learn something is to teach it. I started teaching human sexuality 8 years ago, kind of on a, hey, I can do this, and then have evolved over that time to really be able to put more nuance and more more subtlety into the work that I do. So I as a teacher, as a therapist, I see myself either as a midwife, bringing to life things, as a shepherd, guiding people, but having an investment. I also think of myself sometimes as Virgil. And if you've ever read Dante's Inferno, Virgil is who leads Dante into hell. And, as helping professionals, that's where we need to go sometimes, right? And to be able to go there fearlessly with someone to carry them. On the more personal side, I am sign male at birth, but non-binary trans feminine person. I use they, them pronouns. I am the father of two kiddos who will turn 13 this week of recording, one of whom is trans male, and both of whom are neurodivergent. In their diagnoses of neurodivergent, both my wife and I have realized that we are neurodivergent. She sought a diagnosis because she wanted to be able to get some treatment. For me, it's just, hey, I'm ADHD and I have a sensory processing disorder. And gosh, my life finally makes sense, which is really awesome.
Yes.
I love playing board games. I like playing some video games. I brew kombucha. I ski not very well. I love watching football, which is to say soccer, but the rest of the world calls it football, and F1 auto racing, and just being outside. I try to bring wisdom into all that I do. So if I think about, I started skiing when I was 50 because my kids started skiing. I'm going to be 56 this year. But, there was some real wisdom in skiing. It's like, look where you're going, because if you look down, you're going to end up on the ground. When in doubt, turn uphill, right? It's like sometimes you got to slow down a little bit. And also just, embracing fear. Like the first time you go down that steep slope
Yeah.
is, it can be a little shocking, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've done this a whole number of times. So anything else you'd like to know?
Right. Oh, I love that so much. Well, it was really great to get to know a little bit more about you. And so next month in August, you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
presenting at what we are calling our non-vanilla online weekend with Midori. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about at that event?
Yeah, Midori is great because she will reach out to me and say, I'm doing a thing. I would like you to talk. What do you want to talk about? I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, awesome. So I had this moment of there was this, I think it's a children's book or an adult's book or something like that, something to the effect of everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten. I don't know if you've heard of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I have.
So
Yeah.
my thought is, because we're working with helping professionals and we're working, it's funny, the one vanilla thing I really like is vanilla ice cream, with the black flecks of vanilla, but otherwise I'm not very vanilla. But what I thought about was things that I have learned from that have helped me as a helping professional.
Yeah.
And just as a little bit of a preview, Kinky is so much about consent and
Mm.
boundaries. And I've been able to bring those to my work as a couples therapist. But even with my children, we started with them at 2. Would you like a hug? No? Okay. You don't have to have a hug. And what's interesting is I've heard some parents go, well, that's my kid. I'm going to hug them. And I'm like, oh, great. You're teaching them that it's not okay to say no. And I only tongue in cheek call that job security, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So yeah, I want to look at that and things like tolerance of pain. Pain is information.
Yeah.
And we think about pain and pleasure, but sometimes the things that one person would call pain are another person's pleasure.
Right.
Or one person's intense. I happen to have a very high pain tolerance. So if my wife and I go to the doctor, not my mom, my wife and I go to the doctor, and I have an injury, and the doctor says, on the scale of 0 to 10, what is your pain? And I'll say like 3, and she'll look at me like, regular people, all right, 7, right? Because I experience pain in a different way.
Yeah.
And, we tend to think of pain as negative, but it's data, right? You touch a
Mhm.
hot stove, move your hand.
Right.
But for a lot of people, it's also endorphin, right?
Mhm.
So whether that's through play or intense exercise or, ecstatic dancing, you might actually feel intense sensation. Is that pain? So yeah, what I'm hoping to do with folks is to just give a different lens of how to look at some of these things.
Yeah.
I think in particular and kink can be stigmatized by some.
Right.
But I point out, I've done a few talks on fetishes, and that most of us have fetishes, right? Because the definition of a fetish is sexual arousal by a non-living, non-genital body part.
Mm-hmm.
It's really funny because they make a specific exception for dildos and vibrators because they're supposed to turn you on.
Right.
But if it turns out that you like the curve of the neck, or you like legs, or you like Chanel number 5, or sweaty gym socks, those are
Yeah.
all fetishes, right?
Yeah.
But they're not a fetishistic disorder because it's not necessarily causing you distress, unless the only way you can, have pleasure is from sweaty. The only way that you can have pleasure is from sweaty gym socks. And that's frustrating to you because you can't get sweaty gym socks or something like that. Yeah, and I
Right.
and I try to use lighthearted examples like that because I think people go, "Oh, okay," because it's like, "Oh, I don't have any fetishes." But in the same way that people don't necessarily self-identify, and I'm very, very labeling is great as long as you get to do it to yourself. They don't identify as kinky, but they're doing a lot of non-vanilla things, right? But the joke is, like, for some people, kinky is having sex with the lights on. For
Yeah.
some people, it's having sex with the lights
Yeah.
on. And the other piece of it is I've started using a book which is, surprise, surprise, called Human Sexuality, but it approaches it from a cross discipline, more anthropological, sociological, not just psychological point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And it really looks at some of the deficiencies that we have in therapy education. So, for example, most of us, if we got a therapy, not therapy, God, let me back up, can edit this
Yeah.
piece.
Yes.
The deficiencies that the Human Sexuality, the book that I use, covers the deficiencies that we have in sexuality education. So, for example, we are taught about what can go wrong. So, diseases and pregnancy. And not only are we taught that, we're taught, oh, you should use barriers like condoms or dental dams to prevent disease. And what I find out is that a lot of people use them for penetrative sex. So
Mhm.
for vaginal sex or anal sex or oral sex. Um, but a lot of people don't use them for oral sex.
Yeah.
So are you really protecting from disease, or are you protecting from pregnancy? And knowing, for example, that something like gonorrhea can take root in the throat.
Mm.
So challenging some of those notions around, well, I'm practicing safer sex. I'm like, no, you're practicing pregnancy avoidance, and it happens to be a side effect of doing that.
Yeah.
The other piece is we don't teach about pleasure. We don't
Right.
teach about joy, right? Like, what does an orgasm feel like?
Mm-hmm.
Asking that question is kind of like, what does indigo look like?
Yeah.
And there's this famous, if you know Oliver Sacks, he's the guy behind Awakenings, and he's a unfortunately deceased, but neurologist who wrote about a lot of different experiences. And when he was younger, he said he took a lot of LSD and he took a lot of amphetamines, and he looked at the wall and said, "Show me indigo." And the universe showed him indigo, and then he was very sad because he knew he would never see it again.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you describe an orgasm to someone? I can remember a story when I was in college of a peer of mine, a woman, who said, I was playing with my partner, and we were getting hot and heavy, and all of a sudden I thought I was going to pee, so I stopped him. And then only about 6 months later did she realize that she was actually about to have her first orgasm because she had not masturbated prior to that. Because again, good Catholic upbringing, right?
Right.
But and I've related that story to other women, and they were like, "Yeah, the first time was kind of scary because I didn't know what was going to happen. I did think I was going to pee, and I didn't want to do that in the middle of sex."
Yeah.
So how do we have pleasure? And does that pleasure sometimes involve kink?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, Other things I might want to talk about are things like using role play in
Yeah.
having difficult conversations. Um, what else did I think about when I was brainstorming around this? Just the general idea that looking outside of the box, something like a safe word, right? We use this in kink, red, yellow. We forget about green. Green is a really important safe word because that means, hey, keep going. This is awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Red is often stop. Yellow is kind of like, you need to slow down a little bit. That rope is pinching me here or there or something like that. But teaching couples that they can use safe words in a social situation or in an argument where it's like, and the way I try to frame it is, I can't show up for this conversation, so I'm going to safe word. And it doesn't mean I'm avoiding it. It means that I would like to reconvene later when I can show up better. So is that exclusively a kink thing? I don't think so, but it's something that we talk about. And I think many of the things that we talk about in kink and also in consensual non-monogamy are things that couples and individuals should do as a regular practice. Consent, boundaries, differentiating between wants and needs, for example. So I think of needs, I heard someone talk about needs as very high level. I need to stay connected with my long distance partner. Wants are very tactical, low level. We stay connected by sending each other texts, doing video chats, remembering each other with funny memes, right? But I think what happens is that people express a lot of their wants as needs, and then they come across as needy. Right. And that was a light bulb moment for me recently, so I love to embrace this phrase that's attributed to Michelangelo, which is ancora imparo. I am still learning. And I think, I mentioned earlier, I don't have as much formal education. I certainly have taken continuing education courses and I've taken other courses, but so much of the learning has been this life learning for me. And having children has helped that. Teaching them about sexuality and having it be a healthy example rather than what many of us get, which is a really unhealthy example. But yeah, that's kind of in the gist. I mean, I hope I didn't drop too many spoilers, but
yes, no, I love it. We could use little bits, leave like a breadcrumb trail.
yes.
Well, I have another question for you. So, in your practice, do you work with a lot of kinky clients?
I do work with a lot of clients, and I advertise myself that way, both as in the community and in non-monogamy. What I have found is clients will often want the direct experience that I have had. So my journey, which is about 30 odd years officially, I probably knew I was kinky when I was like 5, but didn't know what it was. Sometimes my clients want to know specifically about my journey. So whether that's my gender, kink, or whatnot. Other times they're more just like generally interested. So I engage in what I call self-disclosure. This is what it was like the first time I went to a munch 30 odd years ago. And stealth disclosure, which is talking about my lived experience, but not naming it as my lived experience. So I might talk about an interaction I had with a play partner, but I wouldn't say, oh, my play partner so-and-so who lives in this place and I did this. I might say, I heard this story once about blah, 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 blah. Because lived experience and someone sharing their lived experience, I think, is often one of the best teachers. And it doesn't need to be about me, right? And I think that's where therapists differ a little bit. We do try to limit self-disclosure in a way that a coach may actually encourage self-disclosure because there's a different mindset there. And then you get into like doctors and nurses or medical assistants where you know pretty much nothing about them.
Yeah.
And yet you're supposed to tell them these intimate details. So, if I look at helping professionals, you probably don't know much about, if you're a drinker, your favorite bartender, or my hairdresser happens to be my friend, but you may not know much about the hairdresser or the barber. And, I see those as helping professionals. I see financial advisors as helping professionals. And yet you are sharing information with them as well. So.
Right. So do you have any tips for professionals working with kinky clients? And now in our audience at Sexual Health Alliance, we have educators, counselors, coaches, medical professionals. Of course, we have therapists too. We have researchers. So in any capacity, working with key clients, do you have any tips?
Yeah, for sure. One thing is to do your best not to be completely surprised. And when you are, speak to it. So some version of like, wow, that was unexpected. Can you explain that to me? Or, wow, I haven't heard that term before. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah.
And do your best to be non-judgmental. Now, I put an asterisk on that because people say, oh, I'm a non-judgmental therapist. And I say, baloney. You are judgmental. You just do not impose that on your clients. What I mean is, if something sounds weird to you or offensive or really taboo or out there, if it's not causing harm, so it's not criminal, something like child sex abuse, if it's consensual, do your best to be able to nod and go, okay, that's in the back of your head, not what I would do, but not necessarily get into the place of being defensive or needing to explain the reason the person ought not be doing this. Or could be the opposite, like, you're doing it wrong. It would be so much better if you did it this way. So try to come at it with curiosity. Like, what does that do for you? Because we do need to be diligent about things like abuse.
Right.
So how do you tell the difference between a really good date last Friday night and an abusive relationship? Both of them might involve bruises, right?
Right.
And when we're taught, it's like, oh yeah, you need to screen for domestic violence. And it's like, yeah, if I know my couple, that might have just been a really good date last week. So trying to stay out of that judgmental place. And I really do recommend getting consultation. So doing something like the Sexual Health Alliance. I offer consultation, particularly to my unlicensed students and unlicensed therapists, because I think they need it. But if you're charging $250 an hour, I'm going to charge you for consultation because, you can pay for it. But also engaging in things like role play to have it not be the first time that X and Y and Z happens, right? I have a saying that I should copyright. I think at this point I have prior art on it, which is life is uncomfortable. You can be uncomfortable now on your terms, or you can be uncomfortable later on someone else's terms. And I think that acknowledgement of discomfort, and I tell my students, like, I am uncomfortable. You are a new group of, 15 to 25 people. Some of you I know, some of them I don't. I don't know how it's going to go. I am uncomfortable. I'm also an introvert, right? So Michelle, you and I are talking on a Monday morning and this is all good. And then it'll drop and I'll be like, ooh, I'm out there in the world, right? So yeah, that's kind of that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. My last question for you is the fun question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the wildest piece of advice someone's ever given you about relationships, and did it actually work?
So this is interesting because this is not like jumping on the chandelier's wild. This is like the almost brutally honest wild. So there is a Swiss British philosopher. His name is Alain de Botton. You can look him up on YouTube. And he has a series called The School of Life. And I have my human sexuality students watch a 20-minute clip of him talking about love. And some of them disagree. He says that romantics ruined it for all of us. But one of the things he says is that, and again, he's British, so you have to understand the context of the word mad. The ideal first date is, Michelle, this is how I am mad. How are you mad? Meaning, here's my baggage. What's your baggage? And I had that light bulb moment of like, that's not going to work for everybody.
Yeah.
I did try it at least once with a new romantic partner who really did engage in it. And, we had this like 8-hour conversation about our, things that we struggle with. And there was a piece of it that was just so beautiful of, here's all my stuff. And Is that going to work out perfect? No. Like, do you need to tell everyone your trauma necessarily, or do you need to tell everyone every experience? But it's almost like, here's some user manual. And I actually have some friends who have Google documents that are self-described user manuals. Like, if you're going to date me, please read this because it will make it a lot easier. Yeah. So this idea that you should, to the best of your ability, talk about what might be challenging, but also talk about your superpowers as soon as possible. Because of this idea that, many people are on their best behavior for the 6 months, and then you figure out like, oh, I don't really like how you smell. Or, I don't like that you put the toilet paper one way or the other. So I thought that was kind of wild, just to be able to be just super honest.
Yeah.
In that moment. Now, is that going to work for everyone? No. I also think that it causes you to examine who you are as a person when you're engaging with another person. So it's like, what am I bringing to this? So, is it wild, as I said, swinging on the chandeliers? No. Is it wild in the sometimes brutal honesty is the best gift that you can give someone?
Yeah.
And some acceptance around, like if you're, struggling with something like bipolar and it is well regulated, awesome. I know what your triggers are, so I will try to avoid them. I cannot guarantee it. And when something goes sideways, I know what to do. I'm not just like, what the heck just happened there? And honestly, one of the things that my students always say in the feedback that I get is, we really appreciate that Jo talks about them making mistakes. And I think that piece is like, yeah, this is how I messed up. Like, when I tried to be a dude in my 20s, I was terrible at it. That just kind of filled in, and now like I don't claim to have the experience of a woman. I claim to have the experience of a feminine person, but that moment when you wear a dress for the first time without tights and you're like, wow, I feel really exposed. And that's something that I know that a lot of female identified people have connected with. So
yeah. Well, that was a wonderful answer. Thank you for that.
my pleasure. Yeah.
All right, everyone. So anyone who is interested in learning more from Jo can attend our online weekend event. It's called the Non-Vanilla Xceptional Weekend with Midori, happening August 9th and 10th, 2025. This is an online event. It's very accessible. You can get your tickets online at sexualhealthalliance.com. Well, thanks for being with us today, Jo.
Thank you. And you're welcome. And I really look forward to being with folks in August.
Yes. All right, everyone. Thanks. Bye. Thanks for watching our video. Do us a favor, share this with someone who might benefit from this information. Your support helps us reach more people with important sexual health information. If you're passionate about this space, we know you'll enjoy these videos, so check them out. Go ahead and give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and remember, you are exceptional.